Just me, a place to be me, where you get to experience life. 'Cause life is a journey, not a guided tour. If you want the rainbow, you have to go through the rain.
Welcome back, guys. Thank you so much for joining in and checking in with us. Again, we are wrapping up this May with talking about women and honoring women. We are talking with two mental health professionals, Mr. Dale Slaughter and David Buchanan, and they are two panelists and organizers of the Ladies Night Out event series that is hosted bi-monthly within the community with a goal of uplifting our women and in our relationships, in our families, and within our community. For the past few weeks, we have been discussing women's well-being, and we have been discussing dating, and we have been discussing marriage, and this week we're going to be discussing motherhood. We are discussing these topics around the idea of trauma, the pandemic, and how these stressors impact the daily functionings and relationships that women have, how we interact with one another, how we interact within our parenting, how we interact with our spouses, how we interact within our relationships. And so we're going to continue to carry on this conversation about healthy ways women can navigate a lot of these stressors. And we're going to finish it off by talking about motherhood and what does women's mental health and women's wellness look like when it comes to taking care of yourselves, but then also recognizing that you have to take care of your children as well. So overall, you guys are licensed mental health professionals. Can you share some of the hardships that you have seen women come into the office and share about motherhood during the pandemic and as the pandemic regulations have been lifted? What are some of the concerns that women have come in regarding their mental wellness and motherhood?
I think from my perspective, well, first off, again, ladies, thank you so much for having us on again this week. I tell you, you ladies have really, really worked us this month. It's been some great topics, some great conversations, but you ladies have really, really put it on us this month. But again, we honor you ladies for everything that you do for our community and everything that you do for all of your listeners. But to go back to your question, one of the things that I've seen with just in terms of the hardships of women and motherhood specifically is the lack of support from unfortunately from fathers. I have seen mothers that are, single mothers that are doing everything that they can to hold a family together. Now, again, this is not saying that every father is not a good father, but it puts a strain on mothers to try to fill in the gaps. And so that lack of support from fathers and also lack of support from other family members. It could be some past issues, some past trauma that may have occurred within the family or some different things that may have occurred, some different situations from the past. But there are a lot of mothers out here that don't have the traditional family support that other mothers may have, and that really puts a strain on mothers to as I said earlier, to really try to fill in the gaps, as well as a breakdown in community systems. I have seen a lot of mothers that are struggling with the school system, with Department of Social Services, with other systems that are are important in our community. And so these are the trends that I've seen just in terms of some of the hardships that the mothers that I work with or have worked with in the past have really experienced.
I would say definitely very well said, Mr. David. I couldn't add to anything other than that. To the community breakdown and all that is spot on. The only thing I'll add is just the added stress of just unrelenting work environments. In other words, the work environment has been more stressful to put in more hours. Yes, you're at home, so now you can do more of these hours, that kind of thing. A lot of mothers are working from home. It made it more, I guess, accessible, but at the same time, mothers are also trying to balance getting the kids on and this, that, and the other. So during the pandemic, I think working at home was just a deal, but coming out post pandemic it's like, okay, you have to do both. You're at home at one point, you come to the office at another point, and I see more stresses and unrelenting work environments to where bosses are really hammering down, and even on men too. The dads or whatnot, they putting in more hours or whatnot. In my perspective, as far as just not being there, and then everybody's exhausted, and so no one's there for the kids. So, and just that whole unbalance is it. Of course, in a normal setting, it's the unbalance is there, but then you put in trauma, that's a whole nother level of just unbalance there, that just adds to everything. And so I think just the overload of work, the stress, the inability to try to be a family, really core at its core, with those lack of supports and everything like that. But in general, just mothers struggling to deal with the everyday stresses, because of the trauma itself. So definitely well put though, Mr. David. You handled that.
And then with that being said, how do you feel like some of these stressors trickle down or trickle over to the children?
Well, I would definitely say with the kids, I mean, just the inability to regulate emotionally and structurally and just communicate, period. That breakdown from mother to father, it only trickles down to kids. So, but kids, as we know, will act out behaviors, because they're not going to really respond emotionally and talk about their feelings. They're going to act out behaviorally. So you have an increase in upchuck in the home as far as how kids reacting to mom or dad or whatever, and you have that in the school system or what have you. So, as mom or dad, or mom in this case, is expressing the way she feels, kids are not, and so they just act it out. And so it just escalates more problems on mom, and on mom to have to now navigate with the school. She gets frustrated with the school. School is not trying to talk to me about my child. I gotta now fuss them out, and my child is fussing me out about something else, and it's just a whole chaotic ball of just of lack thereof of just anybody hearing someone to get a resolution. And so then they come to professionally, they come to us for the answers. It's like, okay, what are we doing? I say the first thing we have to do is recognize who is on your team and who is not. You have to find some supportive people in your corner, in that lack thereof of the support, as Mr. David said. But the first support you should have is one another. So it's almost like you have to foster that whole element of, it's like not us against the world, but this is our world in this home. And we have to, one, fight for one another to get a balance here, and in supporting each other to support outside the home. And I think that's what really COVID really emphasized for me. It's like, okay, what is the support in the home first and foremost? And then that support can be translated outside the home. You know what I'm saying? In other words, it's like, if I'm not supporting my little brother and doing what they need to do, how can I support my friend when I go to school? It's like opposite. It's like we've been looking at saying, okay, we need to get support out on the outside. I said, well, that's great to get that support on the outside, but what's the first team? Is the first team in the home or outside the home? So it's kind of like you have to foster some of that difference. There is what I have worked with some of my clients in. It's almost like they'll support someone on the outside before they even support somebody in the inside their home. So again, that whole confusion and support that needs to happen from the inside, and you can gain the support on the outside.
It's like one of those one of the things that I come across is, especially when the main parent is stressed out, one of the things that we kind of fall short with is really allowing the child to talk. And when we get stressed, we'll say, oh, we want to hear what the child says, we want to hear what your child says, but at the same time, do you actively listen to your child? So it's one thing to ask, well, how are you feeling today? Or what did you do in school? It's a whole nother thing to actually listen to their response. And a lot of times when we're in heightened stress, where we have to worry about some of our basic needs, then that ability to listen to what is really going on with my child becomes foggy. It becomes, I see the behaviors that you're displaying. You're not turning on your camera at school.
Right.
I work too hard and I'm going out here and risking a lot of things in order to get you the basic needs, and you're not doing what you're supposed to do. But in all actuality, where it's a little challenging to take off that lens of my stress and really focus on and receive some of the stuff that my child is also going through, because I have so much going on in my world of sustaining and being a mother that I sometimes forget to realize that my child has their own set of concerns, stressors, and anxieties and worries that if I don't nurture and cater towards, instead of just looking at it as a bad child, then I'm creating unhealthy, dysfunctional adults.
Right. Exactly. It kind of goes back to last week when Miss Serena was talking about the wise mind. It's almost like you got to help your child with a wise mind as well, because they don't know what that means, especially if they're not in working relationship with a clinician. They're not going to know that. So if a mother or a mom is going through that trauma supporting herself, she can actually pass that on to the children. Again, back to the education. What am I teaching my child? If I teach myself that I can get this, now I can teach my child that this is also what you need. Again, it goes back to what I said before. Support within the home, first and foremost.
Now, y'all are talking about mothers with little itty bitty babies. But what about those mothers that are still mothering fully grown children? Because they're still my child. Whether they're in my home and I'm doing it, or they're in their own home, but I'm in their home from a distance because I'm still trying to be their mother, or mothering and nurturing, or trying to help them to develop to be productive in society, but they are fully grown. But I'm struggling because I, as a parent, can't let loose. So what advice can you give me to help me? Because during COVID, I really, really saw how non-productive they were. And then post-COVID, now they're more entitled because they were taken care of during COVID financially by the government, now try to have them to go out to work. And so I'm struggling even more so now after COVID, because they're really entitled now and I feel obligated to meet those needs. But I don't want to. I really don't want to.
Well, I will say two things. The first thing is you have to trust the process that you've already invested into your child. Whenever they were 8 years old, when they were 12 years old, when they were 14 years old, when they were 17 years old, you set a foundation for them to get to where they are. And you just have to trust that process, that they will go back and understand the process. And you may even have to reiterate that process to them as well, that, hey, this is what we used to do. This is how we did it. This is how you got to this point. But you may have to reiterate that process to them. And then the second thing I would say is, as a parent, we have to adjust our role in terms of support with our kids. You know, even though we still see them as, that 8-year-old with their nose running, and we're running around trying to get them Kleenex to wipe their nose and, wipe the stuff out of their eyes and all of that stuff. These are grown tail children now. And so we have to adjust our role in support. Our role may not be to run over there and get that Kleenex. Our role may be to let them know they need to go to Walmart and make sure that they get the Kleenex brand, because it has moisturizer in it and it's not gonna break you out. So we're not giving it. So we're still helping them and we're still supporting them, but we're doing it in a different way and in a different role. And that's something that we have to continue to evolve, because not only with COVID, but just as they get older, and just as we get older, just as they start to develop a family and we become grandparents and all of these things. We just have to be mindful about our role and become comfortable with staying in that role. It may not be, yeah, and I think Miss Smith may have talked about it last week. Control. That is a big piece of it. Whenever our role evolves, we're giving up a little bit more control. And that's something that we internal battle with. But we have to be able to absorb in our minds that our role is changing. And as it changes, we're relinquishing more control back to them. And we have to trust the process that they're going to be able to take that extra road and be able to live the rest of their life.
My son will come back and ask for the $2 for the tissue, but I like that advice. Thank you so much. Mr. Dell, did you have some more to add on that one? Because it's a lot of us out here that are raising grown children.
I would say just the concept of raising grown children, you have to always, fall back and say, okay, am I raising my grown children, or is my grown child ready to raise themselves? That's the question that you ask. Did I do enough? All right. Am I doing enough? Did I do enough to set that foundation, as Mr. David said? And I would say to every woman out there, yes, you did. It's just now you have to be secure and step back and allow them to make the moves, and you kind of follow now. At first you were the leader and they were following you, but you've taught them how to lead. You've given them those foundations. And now, however they choose to lead, you have to be comfortable with it. Well, as I learned this morning, be comfortable with the uncomfortable. Okay? Because sometimes if you uncomfortable, your own self-control want to take over and say, hey, now, or your control takes over and you're not self-controlled and you want to jump in and say, all right, you need to do this, you need to do that. And that old parent come out. The parent that's wanting to get the 8-year-old and get that Kleenex and this, that, and the other. And you said, I'll use your same analogy there, Miss Tracy, is I will give my son the $2. I'm gonna ask him, how you want to earn this $2? All right, you can earn the $2 from me. This is how you can do it. I noticed that the nose wasn't telling me, but look, how about this? I got a proposal for you. You can earn this $2. You earn it, and then there you go. Now you can do the $2 with your nose, but I have noticed, I'm going to make you aware that your nose is a little dirty. And I don't think that would be nice for the ladies to check you out like that, for the men and the women or whatever the case may be. But you can earn the $2 from me. That's how I would handle that situation, because it teaches responsibility. While you're relinquishing the control, you're also giving the responsibility back to them, because they are grown. And as they say, eventually grown and gone. Okay.
My man.
So again, I think it can be held accountable for what they're doing in their lives, but you can't take all control back, and you have to somewhat be a little uncomfortable to get comfortable in it. You know what I mean? But again, like Mr. Dave, I can't, he said it very well. He said, look, you have given them the foundation, and they know what to do. It's just now, will they learn to do it as a need versus their want? And you have to, pull back some.
I definitely appreciate that insight. Definitely. What are some final tips or practical tools that you can give mothers so that they can effectively manage their stress and any type of unresolved stress or trauma while still caring for their children, whether it be adult children or under the age of 18?
I would say mindfulness is a tool that I definitely encourage a lot of people to use. And one of the things that I work with people on is staying in the moment. We can't allow ourselves to spend too much time on the past and too much time worrying about the future. So we really have to be mindful about staying in the moment and being able to understand that, okay, this is where we are with the situation. We're not gonna spend an absorbent amount of time figuring out how we got here or how we're gonna get out of it. This is where we are now. This is the stressor that we're at now, and how can we get through this now? I also think that self-evaluation is very, very important as well. Seeing seeing the entire situation, in terms of, what the stress, what the stressor is, what anxieties or emotions we're feeling, um, what's going on with our kids and how we're taking care of our kids, but really looking within ourselves to look at the entire situation, to make sure that we're being able to get a full picture of what's going on and just not being emotionally charged or just looking at it from one perspective. And if you're fortunate to be in the area or some resources, I think support groups are very, very helpful also because they really allow you to share your story, get perspective from others, and know that you're not in this fight alone. That you're not the only one that's experiencing these stress related issues, or you're not the only one that have some children that may not be doing the right things that's causing you stress and anxiety. So if you are able to locate a support group or know someone that can help you find a support group, I think that helps manage your stress and manage your anxiety as well. And also, it allows you to feel that you're not the only person that's going through this. And, you can have someone that's in a similar situation um, go through this journey with you. And, you guys can support each other through it.
Yeah, all that's great, Mr. David. As also, I would just add that, I think individually, as even just women are not mothers, establishing boundaries, I think that's also helpful for mothers to establish boundaries. Knowing that motherhood is a role and not the identity, but I think sometimes moms overstep the bounds who individually they are with taking on the role full-fledged of mom, and they forget about the individual in which they are. So establishing boundaries with your kids is definitely important because you need to protect your emotional well-being while still being the individual you are and emotionally investing in your children. It has to be a role there. Sometimes I see moms sacrificing themselves in the space of I'm not taking care of myself, I'm not limiting my own individual support for the sake of being mom, but your child is disrespecting you as a person, and so they'll take the role of well, he just said that, or whatever the case may be. And I'm like, wait a minute, establish a boundary. My child is not only fussing and cursing me out as mom, they cussing you out as an individual. So he's treating you like some dude on the street. You need to definitely check him as the individual you are. And so creating those boundaries is very important with your children, especially Miss Tracy, as you alluded to, when they get older. Like, wait a minute, no, I am mom, but I'm also this woman here, and you're disrespecting this woman. So establishing great boundaries are very, very important because it teaches them that you have a boundary with me and I have a boundary with you. And as a grown person, you cross my boundary, you're not talking to mom no more. You talking to me. And so you've crossed that boundary with me, and now I have to step back, and you need to step back and reevaluate how you want to approach me, period. Mom, I love you, but you disrespected the individual person that you're speaking with. And so that can also be a great thing. The other thing I would say, just communicate, definitely communicate your struggle. If you're struggling with your child being 8, 9 years old, fussing and crying, and this, that, and the other, just say, well, at this point in time right now, I am struggling with trying to address you. When you're ready to talk to me as a 8, 9-year-old, 10-year-old child, I'll be willing to listen to you. Basically establish those boundaries. And you can say that to the grown person too. I hear that you're fussing and upset about the situation. I'm gonna hang up when you're ready to talk to me about it logically and ethically and like emotionally unstable. Then I'm willing to listen, and you hang up. And so it's establishing those boundaries, being real clear and concise about communicating yourself, because anybody out here outside of your home and in the relationship roles will do the same, probably a little more abruptly. And so you doing it with care can still communicate that to either one of your developmental ages of children. So that's what I would add.
Wow, thank you guys so much. Those are a lot of good tips, a lot of good information. So we have really recognizing that you are a role as a mom, but as a human being, you still expect and need to communicate basic respect and communication, setting boundaries, and establishing social supports. Because when you go in a silo and try to navigate the world by yourself, it can be very lonely, stressful, and challenging. Sometimes we need that community. So thank you guys so much for sharing your insight this week. And to wrap up this Mother's Day and Women's Month, thank you guys so much for your insight, and make sure that you take care of yourself so that we can all take care of each other. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to Just Me Therapy podcast. If you are seeking further one-on-one diagnoses, interventions, and treatment plans, please consider scheduling an appointment with an individual counselor at Journeys Counseling Center, located in Greensboro, North Carolina. Journeys can be reached at 336-294-1349. The mission of Just Me Therapy podcast is to use authentic conversations to uplift one's mind, body, and soul. The goal of Just Me Therapy is to offer affordable education and insight to individuals who experience financial barriers to accessing individualized behavioral health care services. With that being said, the information, including opinions, advice, and recommendations discussed in this podcast, are intended for individual, informational, and educational purposes only. Such information is not intended to substitute the recommendations of your own licensed therapist or healthcare professional. Although we are licensed behavioral health professionals, we are not your licensed behavioral health professional. As a result, the advice mentioned on this podcast should not replace the recommendations offered by your own qualified health professional.